Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Shop Talk, hosted by the Triangle Area SQL Server Users Group. In case this is your first time, welcome to Shop Talk. The whole idea is it's about 6 p.m. here on the East Coast. We're going to spend an hour talking about a few different topics, probably get derailed by chat. Perhaps we'll have important lessons learned and critical life advice. If you've been here multiple times before, welcome back. We're glad to have you. If you actually have been here multiple times before, but you have the short-term memory of the guy in Memento, welcome for the first time. And just remember that the $5 first-time dues, you have to pay them up first. So be sure to pay that. I'll remind you next week as well. All right, on to what we're doing here. So once we figure out what we're doing here, we'll let you know. But we have a few items, a few things to talk about tonight. Though the idea of Shop Talk is not just saying, let's just ramble about a few things for an hour and try to kill time. But there's also an element of, hey, if chat wants to ask questions, if you've got technical questions and would like technical answers, or at least technically answers, then we can provide them. And I'm going to share my screen so that the chat stream doesn't cover up Mala. There we go. Mala is no longer covered by text. I'm even going to move it up a little bit so that Mala will not be covered by text in the future. So, now that we have freed Mala from text, we should probably say hello to Mala. Hi, Mala.
Good evening, everyone. Nice to meet you.
Yeah. Normally, Mike Christensen would be here. However, we had to actually sell him to Oracle in order to pay our bill. So, and Tracy would normally be here, but she's currently trying to rescue Mike from Oracle. So we'll see how she does. And Rick just won't be here. I'm pretty sure one of these days Rick will come back and then we'll greet Rick. But until then, he'll be like the middle child in Family Matters. We'll just forget he ever existed. Please don't tell Rick that because nobody wants to forget Rick. So, all that stated, we have our first article. Microsoft is discontinuing the HoloLens 2. Speaking of the middle child in Family Matters, did anybody remember that the HoloLens 2 existed? Because it won't for very long. So this article came out October 1st, and this particular one, I just grabbed it. Mala mentioned that HoloLens is going away, so I just grabbed the first article I could find. Not AI enough? Well, maybe not. It was always augmented reality versus virtual reality. And I have to be honest, I think augmented reality has a potential business future that I don't believe virtual reality has. The problems are, number one, if you look at this example of the model wearing the HoloLens, that's not comfortable to wear for 8 hours. And even after 1 to 2 hours, you do it for a little while. It's like, oh, this is fun. This is nice. But then you have this heavy thing on your head, warm, heavy thing on your head. And just imagining trying to do that 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, not working. So Microsoft has confirmed that they are discontinuing the HoloLens 2. There is not going to be a HoloLens 2, or there may not be a HoloLens 3 either. So it will continue to receive critical security updates until the end of 2027 for the dozen or so people who have one of these. And for the original HoloLens, software support ends this year in about 2 months. We'll see if they ever put out a HoloLens 3. But it did launch in 2019, and it seemed like it was pretty neat. And the article is saying, hey, this dominated the enterprise augmented reality market for a few years, but we have seen pass-through become more effective in things, even consumer-grade VR like the Meta Quest 3, where it does a pretty decent job. There's a little bit of delay, but not a huge amount of delay. But same thing applies to the Quest 3. If you told me I had to wear that 40 hours a week to do work. No, not doing that. What dominated? How bad were sales of competitors? Well, Anders, start listing off the competitors. Exactly. I don't believe there were many competitors in this market. But in fairness, remember that the HoloLens did have the contract for the U.S. Army, and there was even image here, the militarized HoloLens. The problem was my understanding was the product did not provide nearly as much functionality as they told the military that it would. And when soldiers were trying it out, they were basically like, this is hot, heavy, short battery life for what it's supposed to do, doesn't work very well in certain conditions, and doesn't provide us reasonable information in nearly fast enough time. So, in other words, I'm only surprised the Pentagon didn't spend $25 billion on it. But Magic Leap pivoted Enterprise 1 month after HoloLens 2, and the Magic Leap 2 came out. Varho had high resolution pass through. Apple and Meta had, I mentioned the Meta Quest, the Apple Vision Pro, all couple dozen devices that haven't been returned. Which that was a fun 2-3 week period where Apple people were like, look, the Vision Pro is going to come out and everybody's going to wear these and everyone's going to spend $4,000 on this device and people are buying it left and right. And then after the reviews came out, the people doing the reviews started returning the device because they didn't want to pay $4,000. And so the number of sales went like disco music in the late 70s. So let's see. Microsoft teased the possibility of an eventual HoloLens 3, but it was canceled due to, quote, confusion and strategic uncertainty, unquote, within the company. And Alex Kipman left in 2022, and then Mixed Reality's seen a bunch of layoffs, which doesn't surprise me. So I'm not hopeful for a HoloLens 3. I will also note that there was never a lot of take-up for software for the HoloLens. I do know a guy in the area here, the Triangle area, Rob Zelt, has been historically big in the Trinug community, the .NET user group, and previously was a bigwig in Ineta. I know he did some work with the HoloLens, I think even with the HoloLens 2. I vaguely recall him bringing a HoloLens 2 in for a Trinug meeting, and was showing off, some of its capabilities, some of the stuff that he was working on, but didn't seem like it ever got past that point of there are a few companies doing work for it for very specific work purposes. It definitely never took up anything in the consumer market, and even in the enterprise market. I think most of the HoloLens support was just a relatively small number of companies that were trying to do third-party software, and then a small to moderate number of companies in spaces like manufacturing that were trying to custom develop software for people on the line. Trying to recall when Microsoft made any kind of hardware that was remarkable. The Kinect, the Xbox 360 Kinect was extremely good for its time. The 3 cameras, the infrared camera, the motion tracking, all of that stuff was great, especially in a consumer grade product. They were at least a couple years ahead of their time for it.
Sorry, yeah. I forgot about Xbox. Yeah, that's correct.
Yep. Keyboard and mouse. Yeah, Microsoft's done some good work with keyboards and mice. The Surface form factor, not the current laptop, but like the Surface Pro, was always an interesting product. I don't know that it was a fantastic...
Do they still make keyboards and mice and things like that?
They actually do. They make the Arc mouse, the one that starts out flat and you click and it gets curved. So they do make the Arc mouse still. They do make a few other mice. I will say that Xbox controllers are really good. PlayStation controllers are also really good. I don't know that there's a consistently better controller company.
Right back. Yeah.
So, yeah, I would say on the whole, some of the hardware that Microsoft puts out is at least good quality. May or may not be remarkable. That's a hard line to push, but a fair amount of it is okay. I'll give you. This may not be the best in class, but for the price point and what they're trying to sell it, it's pretty decent. And then there's some stuff that is legitimately good. Their laptop lines, like I said, the Surface Pro, I appreciate a lot of what they were trying to do with it. And I think that if you don't treat it as a laptop, because the Surface Pro just is an awful laptop, but as a small form factor portable computer that you can take with you, it was pretty decent with the flip down keyboard and kickstand. So it was, and it runs SQL, not the current ones. Well, I don't know. That's a whole
It
weird
runs
thing.
SQL and that's news to me.
Well, he's talking about
Surface
the
Pro.
older ones. The
Oh,
pri-
okay.
the current generation of Surface devices, the newest ones, they switched over to ARM and are using Snapdragon processors, which you can't directly run SQL Server on, but there is a Windows. I guess there's tooling in Windows to allow you to emulate x64 in ARM, and you may be able to run SQL Server through that. But
Okay, interesting.
yeah, it's gotten a little weird. Like, it's the same thing how Apple laptops has also switched over to ARM because um, the ARM processors are so much more energy efficient. So you get much better battery life out of the same relative compute power. And the downside is that the x64, x86 instruction set, it doesn't quite run exactly the same way in ARM. So you have to have things compiled specifically for it, or you use an emulation layer. So, okay, HoloLens says they are fully committed to the militarized HoloLens system. So apparently they're still doing it. U.S. Army plans to run company level operational tests in 2025. Oh my gosh, the Pentagon may still spend a whole bunch of money on it. All right. But its new strategy revolves around a partnership with Meta, which, considering that Meta bought Oculus and that Oculus was the big player in VR in early years, that kind of makes a lot of sense. And so, yeah, interesting article. Meta revealed the Orion, which is still not that great. But I can see somebody eventually cracking this. The problem is going to be either battery life will be awful or the device is too heavy. That battery problem is the biggest problem that I see with AR. The second biggest problem is lack of good, interesting software support. Need microwave power. That would be interesting. I mean, why not stick microwave power source right next to your brain? What could possibly go wrong? This segment brought to you by any phone company. All right. Before I go any further and say something silly, I'm going to go to the next article where I am guaranteed to say something angry. Because this one hits on like a half dozen of my bugbears about the modern world. Insecure Dbot robot vacuums collect photos and audio to train AI. This comes from the Australian Broadcasting Company. And the robot vacuum manufacturer is called Ecovacs. And they have been found to suffer from critical cybersecurity flaws. They're collecting photos, videos, and voice recording taken inside customer houses to train the company's AI models. The Chinese home robotics company says that its users are, quote, willingly participating, unquote, in a product improvement program. Yes, willingly participating. Usually what that means is we've turned it on for you, and it's on page 29 in the EULA that you obviously agreed to, which I'm going to not get into a rant about EULAs and how, frankly, they should be. I don't even believe that EULAs are technically legal. But the problem is you have to go to court to get that sorted out, and there's always a risk. You never trust the judicial system to get it right. And so, nonetheless, willingly participated. When the users opt into this program through the smartphone app, they're not told what data will be collected, only that will, quote, help us strengthen the improvement of product functions and attached quality, unquote. Users are instructed to click above to read the specifics, but there's no link available on that page. So basically, we're not going to tell you what we're collecting because the answer is everything. We're collecting video, photos, audio, voice recordings of what's going on inside of your house. Oh, but what are they doing with this? Well, it turns out that they're collecting data, quote, for research purposes, unquote, including 2D and 3D maps of houses, voice recordings from the microphone, photos or videos recorded by the device camera. And this is apparently an example where, without entering the building, we were able to silently peer through the camera on the device. So, where is the camera? What direction is it taking pictures? It looks like, actually, let me check this out. We have another article. So this is the example of what's going on. This is, see if we can get the camera. Most likely, so this is the device itself. Most likely the camera is somewhere around there. We have various photos, view from kitchen window. So yeah, there's apparently a camera somewhere, probably front forward facing. One spy in every home willingly invited in. I mean, it is a Chinese company. Okay. So you can remotely hack Ecovacs models. So, all right, already this is sounding fantastic. Next, reported problems to the company last year after you found a series of basic errors putting Ecovac customer privacy at risk. If the robots are broken like that, how does their back-end server look? How does their server infrastructure look? The answer is probably also horrible. So I am not going to bet against anybody saying publicly accessible S3 bucket, because this feels so much like a publicly accessible S3 bucket type of company. And Ecovacs, valued at $4.6 billion, says that it's, quote, proactively exploring more comprehensive testing methods, unquote, and committed to fixing the security issues in its flagship robot vacuum in November. All right, Ecovacs says that it anonymizes the data. It anonymizes the house photos, videos, and recordings. Building a deep learning model without large amounts of data is like making a house without blueprints.
Uh-huh.
Due to the unique ground view perspective and uncommon object categories, we cannot find any public data set which fit our needs. Therefore, we cooperated with many institutions to collect data from all over the world. The pre-launch dataset did not involve real user household information, but, well, now it does. Congratulations. We anonymize user information at the machine level, ensuring only that only the anonymized data is uploaded to our servers. I mean, you still are uploading all of the photos. Oh, we've anonymized it at the machine level. So you've given the machine ID. Okay, but then even if there's no way to tie this database entry, this user account to this folder in the server, you still have all of the photos, the videos, the voice imprints. And I don't believe them when they say that it's totally anonymous, because I don't believe companies that after the fact, we're like, no, 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 don't worry, it's fine. Given the track record of said companies, when you find out that, oh, whoops, it actually was the way they anonymized it is that we kept the machine ID in this database and we kept the folder over here with the machine ID, but we didn't have your name and address and social security number. Well, this is Australian, so whatever identifiers that you want. We didn't have that with the data right here. We just had it in the database that also had a password of like ABC123 and was also publicly accessible on the internet. I mean, yes, I am stretching things. I am stating things that have not yet come true, but what's the probability they'll come true? It's greater than 0%. This is exactly the type of thing that has happened several times before where you find out things are bad and then no, actually they're worse than that. Imagery from robot vacuums has leaked before. Intimate photos taken by iRobot devices shared on Facebook. Yeah. So, but iRobot, I will say actually this says it as well. Roombas don't have cameras. Wouldn't facial recognition make it easy to de-anonymize that data? Yeah, potentially. Facial recognition, though, has its problems, and you would have to have examples of this face ties back to this person. It's it's possible you could run the images through and see if you have similar images to people, if you happen to have an image database, which is not trivial. But see my comment about stealing driver license data. Exactly. Yeah, it's not trivial, but it's certainly possible. Images leaked by contract workers, which, by the way, was a big problem for Ring as well, where, oh, well, you're taking all that data, you're collecting it, and it turned out that like everybody at the company had access to all of your photos and video clips from your doorbell and could easily search through that, and there was no preventing people from searching through it and finding things that were interesting. U.S. Border Patrol facial recognition works great. Last time I crossed the border, I didn't even take out my passport. Yeah, and there was already an agent there ready to arrest you. So it was just excellent. Great service all around. You didn't have to wait to get cuffed. It was just very straightforward, right to jail. A plus. A plus plus would get arrested again. It would work in at least a small portion of that data, though. Yes, you're right, Solomon. If you happened to have a large data set, then with photos of people, then yes. Now, just imagine, hey, celebrities. If there's a celebrity who has this, there probably are photos of this person in a database, and you could use facial recognition and say, who is that in the photo? Oh, well, that's this famous celebrity, because the idea is they're already public figures, so their image and likeness is public. Which, if you happen to get, oh, this is this person's mansion or house or whatever, then that might be interesting in itself. But anyhow, do cleaning robots need high definition cameras? The answer is no. No, they don't. They've developed technology that changes, quote, how a robot sees the world, unquote, a privacy preserving camera. So they scramble the image and retain enough information. I could see something like that working. No potential breach of security. You say that, and there always is. I just saw something a few days ago about a small group from Harvard, perhaps, that combined publicly accessible facial recognition with VR glasses to walk down the street, pull up people, search their public info, get addresses, relatives, etc. Yeah, I actually saw an article about that as well, and they were kind of annoying about it, but it was I think it was even just searching on Facebook. They had written an API, if I remember right, that would take the picture and try to figure out, like, could I get a match on Facebook? But let me see if I can dig up that article, because
I recall the uproar around the Facebook facial recognition.
yeah, I'll have to see if I can find it.
I found a nice article, or at least something that looks nice. I posted. One second.
Okay, that was a few years ago. Yeah, facial recognition. Um, there we go. Actually, okay.
Let's start with a story.
Okay, that's a video. Meta Ray-Ban. No, I'm not going to. The Verge. All right, we're gonna have to go to The Verge, people. The things you're making me do. Actually, go to The Verge. We're not gonna go to the comments. Chat. If you make me go to the comments, I'm just turning this thing around. We're done. Okay. 2 Harvard students created a demo of smart glasses using facial recognition to dox people. And using the Ray-Ban Meta smart glasses. That's what it was, as well as public database. So they had a couple of people behind the project. They were identifying classmates, addresses, names of relatives, and chatting up complete strangers on public transit, which kind of interesting. I'm looking. Respect people's preferences. Clearly gesture or use voice controls when capturing video, live streaming, or taking photos. I'm sure that'll work. Finally, a reason to do eye surgery so I can wear Ray-Ban smart glasses. The Meta glasses do include a privacy light that automatically turns on whenever you're recording video, but it's hard to notice when you're outside in bright lighting. People often don't notice when you're filming, especially in crowded public spaces. Yeah, and what's the bet that somebody could just cover up the light with a little bit of tape and then have it not show at all? Probably some possibility of that. Or see if you can physically disable, like you snip the connection to the light, so that way it never turns on. Because I would imagine they probably don't have. Oh, it's just my battery light. I mean, yeah, you could do that. I would say if you can cut the LED connector, or if it's a software connection, yeah, you can modify that directly. That's where having the camera light on, like on a laptop, having the camera light on, if it is not a physical switch, then you could turn the camera on without turning on that light. For most webcams, the light is a nicety. It is not a guarantee. If the light is off, then you're not recording, or that you're not picking up input from the camera. So I could see somebody finding a way to turn off that light, prevent that light from coming on in the first place. How many people even know Ray-Ban makes those? Not many, but it's out there. All right. So that was our next article. Basically, I wanted to rant about robot vacuum companies for a while. As someone that is horrible at remembering names, I would absolutely love to have glasses that would overlay the names of people. I would say that's okay if the problem is there's a definite privacy concern where I don't necessarily want somebody to just know my name. Somebody to just come up to me, oh, hey, Kevin. I don't want that because people I have met and labeled. I mean, I could see that. Also, you could run into the issue of, let's say that I'm I don't know. I could come up perhaps an example of, well, I'm trying to stalk somebody, And so I'm looking for him, and I'm gonna have the glasses pick out where that person is in the crowd, so that I don't have to directly look at the person. Um, this is perhaps a silly scenario, but yeah, it's the type of thing that as this technology improves, could also be used for anti-stalking. Maybe. I mean, you have proven that you violated your restraining order. I suppose there's that factor. Or push button to get restraining order. It'll be like blocking a person on X. The glasses should cross-reference sex offender databases as well as public court records. Well, you know, that could get interesting. Oh, that gets to be a tough one though, because it then raises questions about ability to reintegrate people into society. Like, hey, okay, you were a felon, you went to prison for 5 years. On the one hand, I could actually see a benefit behind this, that, oh, yeah, I don't want you anywhere near me because of that crime you committed. On the other hand, there is the risk of, well, I've reformed, I'm no longer this bad person, but now everybody around me will know, oh, got to stay away from that guy. He's the one who got caught urinating in a tree 12 years ago because he was too lazy to go find some restroom someplace. Which incidentally, don't do that, people, because public urination is going to get you on a sex offender database. So back in the day, college kids had to go. You just go hide someplace. Don't do that. This is Uncle Kevin giving you good advice. So,
pardon me, Kevin, for interrupting.
Please do. This was all going down a very dark area.
I want to ask you a little bit about the history of that advice, because I was not aware of what you said. I was genuinely not aware.
Okay, no, so it is actually a real thing. Only if someone sees you. Yes, if someone sees you. Yeah, so technically it's public indecency, and public indecency will get you put on a sex offender list. It's
wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Which you can make arguments. I'm not going to argue either way, but just letting you know, in many jurisdictions, yeah, that is enough to get you on the list.
Wow. I had no idea. Well, thank you. I mean, I'll pass that on. I know many people who don't know about this. And
just to be clear, I'm not on any list. I'm not on that list. Just to be clear. All right. On a totally different topic. Grant Fritchie, please save us. Quick one. This is more like a palate cleanser after having to talk about all of the awful stuff going on. The only valid test of a backup is a restore. And also because Anders has been doing a lot of restore work today. So Grant went full in on animated images for this one. New item for retirement checklist. Find a place where it's okay to pee in public. Challenge level, impossible. Okay, so there's not a whole lot in the article here of like the how. This is more of just Grant dropping a whole bunch of animated images and saying, yes, test your backups. So you might ask, well, how in the world can I possibly test a backup? That seems like a big challenge. It seems like a lot of work. And to that, I will say, you know what? Use DBA tools. Test DBA last backup. Will retrieve information on last backup, restore it to the destination with a new name. You can restore it to the same instance or to a different instance. You can see that it automatically gives you a default database that's not the same as what you named it. And then renames internal file names so that there's no risk of collision. make sure the restore works successfully, performs DBCC check DB, and then drops the test database. All that in one SQL commandlet, or PowerShell commandlet. And it works well, and it's incredibly easy to put together. So this is something you don't have to test every backup, but I recommend random sampling and picking, like, let's say you have 50 backups or 50 full databases. You might want to pick restore 3 or 4 full databases on a daily basis. And it could do to another server. Or you could restore all full backups. So you could do 100%. At the minimum, I would say random sampling. Yes, do run DBCC check DB, because you want to make sure that the database will restore. You want to make sure that there's no corruption in the indexes, that the backup did save successfully, and that way your storage is looking good. So you could do it if you have the servers available, you have the compute capacity available, and the databases are not absolutely enormous. Yeah, do it for all full backups. You could even do point in time. So in this case, this is not so much point in time, because it is just testing the last full. So you would have to write your own. You would have to write your own capacity to do. Actually, no, I take it back. It looks like we don't have to, because we can ignore log backups. So what this is saying is restore data and log files. There we go. It only restores databases that are smaller than 10 gigs. So you can see actually that restores those files to a different location. Let me see if I can find an example that includes time, because I'm just winging this right now. I restore over 100 terabytes a week. Well, la-di-da, Anders. Which, all joking aside, it's a good idea. There's no real reason not to do it. And just have the compute capacity available and just spam database restoration. What's the worst thing that's going to happen? You're gonna kill your disk on your enterprise server. If so, you were going to kill it with regular processing anyhow. And enterprise servers, these are not like QLC SSDs that were built in someone's backyard and have 12,000 write operations before they die. These are devices that are rated to go for years. Working hard on wearing out SSDs in Azure. And hey, that's Microsoft's problem, not Anders' problem. So I respect that. If they're going to charge you so much money to use their disk, you may as well wear them out. But I do recommend that. Test DB last backup is easy. It works really well. You can write your own. If you have written your own, awesome. Use it. But if you have not, this is a good way to get started. And I also do recommend understanding how to write backup and restore statements in T-SQL without having to go through SQL Server Management Studio or Azure Data Studio, because there will come a time when you will have 3 layers of management staring over your shoulders, waiting for this database to restore. And it looks a lot better if you have a process.
In today's world, would that be really true, Kevin? Unless you're sitting in an office and everybody else is there around you. I don't know. I don't know if I'd have 3 or 4 levels of management wanting to know what's going on, but looking over my shoulder, I'm not sure. I'm just saying I'm not sure. I could be wrong.
In your case, maybe not because of working from home, but there's a pretty good percentage of people who do work in offices. And even if not, you'll have 3 to 4 layers of management on a Zoom call demanding updates, sharing your screen. Share your screen and tell us. So I think the story still holds, even if the exact mechanics of it aren't standing over your shoulder,
Mm-hmm.
but are instead figuratively staring at your screen and waiting, looking at you as you futz around with the mouse, trying to remember where the restore menu is and how to do point in time restoration to a specific time frame.
Mm.
SP underscore create restore statements. Yeah, so if you have that already, then you can use it. Or if you're using something like minion backup, there's a stored procedure that will allow you to restore backups from there. So if you're using it, whatever solution you're using to back up and restore, just test it, make sure that it works, make sure that you understand how to use it, and make sure that you are competent in its use under pressure. If you have practiced repeatedly, you know exactly how the thing works, you know exactly what you need to click in order to get it to function, and you can do this with regularity and consistency, then that time that you will need it, you'll be able to be that calm person who, here, let me restore this database right now. Okay, it's restoring. When will it finish? I don't know. Just go get some coffee. Leave me alone. Obviously, I know what I'm doing because you didn't see me fumbling around, struggling, trying to understand what's going on. I've already
Mm-hmm.
practiced this. I mean, this is one of the key tasks of a database administrator is being able to protect and uh, restore data. So, yeah, it's fine to be the DBA kicking your feet up on the desk because, hey, it indicates everything's going well. As long as when things do go sideways, it's clear that you know what you're doing and that you're not panicking or fumbling around. Because at that point, people will remember all those times you were kicked up on a desk reading a book. But if you know what you're doing, then no, you're like a lion in the savannah, just awaiting, watching your prey, ready to strike at any time, coiled like a cat. I mean, you don't necessarily look coiled like a cat with legs up on the table, but you could be. All right. Next story. We're blasting through stories tonight. Bonuses for knowing how to use stop at. Yeah. Point in time recovery. It's a beautiful thing. I've got this transaction log backup. By the way, you have to be in full recovery model. You can't be in bulk logged for that. Bulk logged will only allow you to restore to the endpoint of a transaction log backup. Will not let you stop in the middle, as I recall. Next article. This is actually from Dan Olivo's Substack, and this is by Andrei Lepikov and Elena Rybakina. No, I've practiced these names. These are definitely names that I certainly have practiced. But I don't want to dive too much into the article itself. Really, it was the introduction that caught my eye. And what this is about is SQL Server executes the query so many times faster. Just keep that in mind. SQL Server executes queries many times faster. Or Postgres doesn't pick up your indexes. Just, those are the important lessons from the story. No, but seriously, where I thought this was interesting. This question, should an open source database management system correct user errors? And what the authors mean by correct user errors is optimizing a query even before the search for an optimal plan begins, eliminating self-joins, subqueries, simplifying expressions, things that you can achieve via proper query tuning. And the authors argue that this is not a simple question to answer because query tuning has a combinatorial explosion problem. But I would argue there is a simple answer. That simple answer is yes. Yes, you should. The reason is SQL is a fourth generation language. We have talked on Shop Talk before about generational languages and talked about what each generation means. And in fact, let me see if I can find generations of programming languages. Yeah, I may have even used this link before in the past because it looks vaguely familiar. And if it is the one that I'm thinking
You
about,
have discussed this in great detail, Kevin.
we
The
have,
same
yes.
article, the same article that we're looking at.
Okay. Yeah, and I want to say
Yeah.
there's probably one point in here that I will fervently disagree with if this is the article that I'm remembering. But
The reason I remember is because I took it back to work the next day and we had a second round of discussion. What people thought. It's been a long time. I forget details and I'm old. But I remember this article pretty well.
yeah. So
Yeah.
just for the folks who are here and have that memento short-term memory, well, generations of languages. First generation was machine language. So it's binary. It's direct interface with hardware. Second generation is assembler. It is one layer of abstraction above first generation. Third generation is procedural. So this is where you introduce branches, if else statements, switch statements, while loops, for loops, function calls, and you're executing procedurally. So second generation assembler, you're doing instructions, and your branches are basically jump to specific instruction. Third generation, it's more of collections of instructions, collections of code that perform specific actions. Fourth generation languages are here's actually the important line. They specify on what needs to happen without worrying about specific implementation details. That is the critical thing to keep in mind about a fourth generation language. Any third generation language, where you're talking anything that's in the C world, Fortran, Pascal, Java, Python, etc., these languages are you're writing code to execute, and you expect the code to execute in a certain way. The fourth generation language, I do not. This is what I remember. I don't consider Python, Perl, or Ruby fourth generation languages. Those are third generation. MATLAB, I can make that argument. But yeah, this is the part of the article that I fervently disagreed with. Okay, so deja vu, no, already happened. Nonetheless, SQL absolutely is a fourth generation language. The whole idea is I would like to define the results that I want to see. You figure out how to get those results. It's not my job to figure out how to get those results. Going back to this article, the whole question is, well, should we rephrase a query so that you can get the same results more efficiently? And the answer is yes. In a perfect world where we had infinite compute and infinitesimal search time, every variant of a query that guaranteed the same result set should follow the same optimized path. So if I give you a simple example, if I say select star from table where A equals 1, that should give me exactly the same path implementation as with records as select star from my table, select star from records where A equals 1. That should be exactly the same path, because the optimizer, the database engine, and the query optimizer should realize those two are equivalent queries. They are mathematically the same. The result sets are guaranteed to be the same accordingly. And therefore, there is one best way of accessing that data. Figure out what that best way is, do it, and return. The issue is that search time is not infinitesimal. Compute power is not infinite. It takes time, it takes energy, it takes power, and there is a hard trade-off between how long are we going to allow this query to run versus we have to cap it at some point and just say, this is the best that we can do. So this is where when you're doing query tuning and you get, this is basically, you have a timeout, where timeout just means the optimizer had this many billion possible plans and it gave up after this many thousand or tens of thousands. And so it wasn't able to search the entire space. We ran out of steps, basically, where the optimizer was allowed to keep trying other options. Well, I understand that in practice, you may not be able to solve every problem, especially as queries get more complicated. As you introduce more joins, as you introduce more complexity in your queries, it will get trickier for a database engine to understand what is the optimal form of that query. However, the answer to the general question, I think, is a hard yes, that you absolutely should correct user errors. I mean, I don't even consider that a user error. If you tell me that I wrote a query one way and that there's a second way to write the query that's faster, and that it's a generically true statement, take the way I wrote the query and just use the implementation that's faster. This is not a third generation language. This is a fourth generation language. It doesn't matter how I wrote the query. What matters is the intent of the result. So to that end, yeah, absolutely, you should be looking at ways to optimize a query. The specific example was using values and how it ends up as a specific implementation in Postgres, whereas in SQL Server it's a little different and performs better. That detail, I don't think that's relevant so much for my point, because my point is that more generic. Yes, this is absolutely where you should go. I think some amount of rewrite by the optimizer is required. Yeah, for sure. But, at the same time, I don't think it should be some. I think it should be as much as you can possibly get away with. And write the query is what you want to retrieve, not how to execute it. Yeah, this because it's a fourth generation language. Keep the query as simple as possible, which comes on the idea that although it is a fourth generation language, it's not a perfect fourth generation language, where implementations are not perfect. So you have to deal with the realities of a database engine that does have a limited amount of time and a limited amount of resources to try to implement an action. And keep in mind that multiple servers around the world will spend energy for nothing. My response to that is, who cares? Ultimately, who cares? If you're telling me there's only one way to write a query, great. Make it in Postgres so that you cannot write the query the other way. If you're that concerned that this version of the query is faster in every case than this other one, make the other one impossible. I mean, if you're going to restrict the language that way, make it so that it is actually restrictive. If you're going to have the two versions and one of them will be faster than the other, then try your best to make both of them equally fast. Is there a reason not to optimize? Even third generation code gets optimized. Yeah. The only way that I see not optimizing as a possible reasonable option is just if your query is so complex that optimization takes much longer than it takes for the query to run. And even then, I don't know that you can truly have a non-optimized way of accessing data, because if you want to get incredibly dumb about it, the least optimal way of accessing data would be take a query, load all of the data in the database into memory, and then search through, just do like a for loop through every single record in every single table, regardless of whether that table is part of the query, and check to see if there's a match here. And then, do that. You could come up with some like convoluted, abhorrent structure to include joins, At this point, you are essentially trying to make an anti-engine. You are trying to make the cruel engine of Hades to punish developers who have had a terrible life. But when it comes to not optimizing or to say cutting it off very early, maybe having a few heuristics instead of more detailed search, I would say the answer is if it's a trivial query, then or if it's a trivial enough query where I'm kind of playing loose with the term trivial enough, because technically a trivial query cannot be optimized because there's only one reasonable path.
Mm-hmm.
But if I'm playing fast and loose with the term reasonable, and you say, oh, well, there actually are a few paths that could be possible, and I just pick this one, even though it's not always the best of the three. Let's say for a very small table, I have 5 pages of data. A scan or seeking each page. Technically, if I need to read data from all 5 pages, a scan is going to be more efficient. But the actual implementation cost if I seeked on each one of those 5 pages versus a scan of the 5 pages is so insignificant in the long run that it could be something where you could reasonably say there are not enough pages to make it worth trying both variants and seeing which one is faster. Just pick one, go with it, and let life go on. They're both less than a millisecond. So I think that could be the answer to when might you not want to optimize, is when the expected time of optimization is greater than the expected time gained from optimization. As you get more and more expensive queries, then the necessity for optimization drastically increases. But for very simplistic stuff, you could have a threshold below which you say, for me even to send this off to be optimized doesn't make sense. And that's where we are in SQL Server when you have trivial as the answer for why the optimizer chose this plan. It chose the trivial plan because it said, this thing is so easy, there's no benefit in even sending this to the optimizer for generation 1 optimization. So, yeah, that would be my short answer. But for anything like this, like in the examples here, I'm assuming it is not a trivial, you're going to select star from table. That's a trivial plan. There's you could technically seek each page. You could technically scan each page. Scan just makes more sense. It's most likely to be faster. So there, if you find some weird edge case where somehow the seek ended up being faster because of some strange property of disk, then it still doesn't make sense to try both. It still doesn't make sense to try to understand the details of it. Just scan and be done in your 2 microseconds. Unless you're like running this against Azure, in which case it's 20 milliseconds. So yeah, I would argue this is the strong opinion. The database engine needs to do as much optimization as it can get away with that makes sense for the task. And you should never punish the user for writing a query in a certain way. If I guess maybe I shouldn't say never.
Why I disagree with that.
Okay, this goes back to if you have infinite compute and infinitesimal search, then I would be very strong in my opinion, never punish the user for the way they write the query.
Right.
In reality, yes. Like if I have nested.
So 2 things, Kevin. Two
Yep.
things. First of all, that's a confusing statement because the user need not be the person who's written the query. Or is that?
I'm kind of assuming here that, yeah, you're right that users don't necessarily constitute the people who wrote the queries, but I'm going from the
Right.
standpoint of the person who wrote the query, or at least had some control over the query.
So in that case, if that's the case, then if it's a poor query, then maybe punishment is a harsh word, but unless you see the consequences, how are you going to write it better?
Well, but at the same time, if
Uh-huh,
like if again, if compute is infinite, if search
uh-huh,
time is infinitesimal, meaning we have a database engine that is perfectly capable of translating any spaghetti gibberish into what is the best way to retrieve that data most effectively, most efficiently.
mm-hmm,
At that point, you can argue there is still moral, or I don't know if I want to go so far as to say moral, but there is still a justification for writing code a certain way that is cleaner, more easy to read, more human readable, human understandable.
mm-hmm,
Um, so yeah, there could be internal team punishment for writing long spaghetti code, nested
mm-hmm,
views of nested views of nested views of user defined functions, like all the stuff that we find horrible, abhorrent, is because ultimately the database engine gives up and
mm-hmm,
just gives you what you asked for, good and hard.
mm-hmm,
But if you have uh that level of compute, then it doesn't matter which way you wrote it, because the database engine will be able to figure out, oh, this is actually equivalent to these other queries that, and this is how you get the information. Now,
mm-hmm,
that's not real. We're not describing the real world. We're describing hypothetical computer science land. In the
mm-hmm,
real world, yeah, there are ways to write queries that the database engine will give up on.
mm-hmm,
Nested views do a great job of this.
mm-hmm,
Nested views that join to nested views that join to nested views, inside of
mm-hmm.
which the nested views join to other nested views. Um,
Yeah, I've seen that nightmare. Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Uh,
But, hypothetically, if the database engine could perfectly interpret this and give you the optimal results, I don't think it is justifiable for the database engine team to decide what is morally correct about queries,
mm,
because that's not their job to decide, other than, did they write the syntax? Does the syntax offer this? If the syntax offers it, then uh, I think there's the designers of the language or the engines should not be able to say, "Oh, your query is abhorrent."
mm-hmm,
Now, there again, in that hypothetical computer science world, in
mm-hmm,
practice, it's totally fair for the database engine designers to say, or the query analyzer or optimization engine designers to say, look, we only have so much time and resources to be able to solve this problem. We've got to solve it within a certain amount of time.
mm-hmm,
It's taking too long. We have to give up. We have to give
mm-hmm,
you whatever we've come up with, instead of spending 3 hours trying to optimize this query so that it will run in 2 milliseconds instead of 3 milliseconds.
mm-hmm,
So that's a reasonable trade off. And that is where I think it can be okay to say, uh, we cannot afford this answer. So we
mm-hmm,
give you the second best answer of doing our best.
mm-hmm.
But I don't think it's okay to say, no, you wrote the query wrong because you used values instead of the way that we think you should write it.
Mm. Okay. No,
So,
I get what you mean.
Anders. Um,
What is he
o-
saying?
only
I had no idea Kevin wasn't.
only a few days a week, not every day. All right.
No, I think I agree with him. What he says, in a perfect world with infinite compute, the computer would know the answer before you write the query.
Also,
It might seem like a joke, and yeah, it's a joke, but I get it.
Well, also, we would be able to do pre-crime, so we would get Minority Report. Instead, the Border Patrol has to wait until Anders comes back into the country to arrest him. All right. With that, we are going to wrap things up for tonight. We are actually 5 minutes over, but you know what? We had some fun, hopefully. I had some fun.
I had some fun.
Mala had some fun. Chat, if you had fun, great. If not, don't worry. Come back in 2 weeks. You may have fun then. Or if you go to meetup.com/trypass, tomorrow night, we have the one and only Hugo Cornelis, who is going to talk to us about the 5 stages of grief, internals of a hash spill. So we are going to get deep into some of the internals of this exact type of query optimization. Quantum computing will solve this. No, it won't. But we're not going to get there because we do have to wrap stuff up for tonight. So meetup.com/trypass. Check that out. We do have the meeting for Advanced DBA tomorrow. We have the Business Intelligence and Data Science meeting coming up on the 22nd. In between, we will have the main meeting. So that's going to come out. Tracy just has to put it up. You'll see it soon. But with that, I'm going to stop sharing. We're going to wrap things up for the evening. We're going to say thank you so much for checking out Shop Talk this time around. And until we see each other at a TryPass meeting or anywhere else for that matter, everybody, take care.